ultimately we're in there, we're in the business of actually, making money so that we can keep all the lights on and keep everyone paid. And sometimes you can get a little bit divorced away from that.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Marketplace Growth by Accoil. This is our first video in 2024. Happy New Year. We are psyched to have you back with us. We're talking about developing business acumen within your company and across your teams. And the reason we're talking about this is because it's something that we heard a lot about. Hiring managers, company leaders saying, it's really hard to find these skills out there, people that have this commercial acumen. We've got 4 ways or 4 areas that you can really focus in on this year to make business acumen and commercial focus a really strong part of your business. With that, I'm Peter.
I'm Kate. How are you all?
We've got 4 things to talk about here. The first up is leadership and setting the environment within the company. Number 2 is individuals, upskilling them, giving them that autonomy to do it themselves and recognizing when you need to step in as a leader to either enable that or facilitate it. Number 3, customer centricity, focusing on the customer in everything that you do. And the 4th thing is bringing it all together. How do you use that business acumen to drive better, faster business decisions? Number 1 thing we're going to talk about is leadership and setting the expectations, setting the environment, and making sure that you're the one leading the way here and giving everyone else the breathing room to understand the business in a way that helps the business grow and the customers. So Kate, tell us about how leaders can set this environment and set the expectations within the company.
Well, number 1 is you've got to decide to do it and then keep on doing it. So keep on, for example, always raising questions. And I think you also need to make an important decision about being more transparent with your numbers. And sometimes as an owner, you kind of want to hold everything to your chest, but this is about actually doing the reverse of that. And Atlassian were very good. When we were at Atlassian, they were very good at actually being transparent about the numbers and things. But without the numbers, you operate people operate in black boxes, which is not a good thing.
What are the numbers that you're talking about sharing?
Okay. So for example, at ThinkTilt, we used to pipe all our sales information into one of our Slack channels. So everybody saw when the sales were coming in. So you could see when the sales were going ding, 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 and when they weren't. And so that actually helped to raise awareness that ultimately we're in the business of actually, making money so that we can keep all the lights on and keep everyone paid. And sometimes you can get a little bit divorced away from that. So as a leader, by making those decisions to open up, have discussions every quarter about your financials or even every month, however you want to do it. So to me, planning and business planning and financials and things go together.
How do you set the scene and enable this to happen in a net positive way for everybody?
Well, I think the first thing is you step back, and I think we didn't do it that well initially, and the staff kept saying to us, not understanding the vision, you need to understand what you're wanting us to do and where to go. So I think we actually had some work to do, but I do think we did get better, and the way we did that was we actually started involving people more in some of the thinking and then communicating that both as groups and then one-on-one. So checking in and saying, we've made this decision because we think it's going to do X, Y, Z to the business, and this is why we did it. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions? So it's about using the group situations and the individual conversations you have with your team to try and encourage that.
Something you'd mentioned before we hit record on this was setting a clear strategy and actually publishing that and making it open to everyone and making sure that everyone understands what it is too.
Well, how many times, Pete, is strategy is in everyone's head? So people say we don't have a strategy. And I heard someone say, yes, people do have strategies. They're just in their heads. And I think particularly it's very easy to keep it in your head, particularly when you're a smaller player, smaller business. So it's about actually getting that down on paper so that people can see the thinking and the framework. Because otherwise, how are they actually going to start thinking in that way if you actually don't send the guidepost? Is that the right word, Pete?
I think it works. Yeah. So I think big takeaway.
Mushing the words again, Pete.
We're keeping that in. So I think main takeaway for me there is, there's a few real quick, is to, as a leader, set the environment, set the expectation, but also, open up a little bit and really just tactically here, publish the strategy that's in your head. So get that out of your head, put it in Confluence where everyone can see it and talk about it. All right, we're going to move on to the second thing here, and that is at the individual level, recognizing, do you have the skills, do you not? And sort of as an individual, putting your hand up, saying, yep, I need to learn more about that. And as a leader, making sure that it's understood that that's okay, that, this is a journey that we're all on together here. When you think about individuals upskilling, what are some of the areas that you think teams should focus on?
Well, I'm a big believer of actually looping back in with people when certain actions have been done and giving feedback on it, both positive and negative. So I think it's about also not being afraid to kind of raise this. And, it's always quite difficult, and I've done it better at times than other times, but I actually also like to just point out, particularly when people ask the question, what can I do to improve? I want to actually, for example, move up and be a manager, or I want to do this. I want to, in terms of my career. And for me, I sit there saying you need to understand some of the business stuff, how to read a finance sheet, for example, balance sheet. And I know that sounds why would I need to do that? But it does knowledge gives you power.
At the individual level, and kind of depending on where people are within the company, yeah, maybe sharing the P&L isn't, maybe you're not going to be that transparent. Maybe not going to share the balance sheet or the cash flow necessarily, but, MRR numbers, MRR trends, churn numbers, I think where a lot of teams and individuals could probably get more involved is in the budgeting side of things and having that conversation, because that has, all the numbers have a direct impact on everyone's work. But especially if we're talking smaller teams here, being involved in that budgeting to me always was really important to understand why we can do things and why we can't do things. Equally as important. It's like, why aren't we doing all this stuff? Maybe the budget isn't there. And getting individuals involved in that seems like a really good opportunity to start bringing people up to speed while thinking about the strategy and sort of tying that all together.
But at the end of the day, you also have to make some tough decisions, and you can't be consensus and everybody, kumbayaing. Sometimes you just actually have to call it, and that's just the way it is. But that's for another topic, Peter.
That's point number 4 today. So we're going to get to that one. Before we do, though, we did want to talk about the third thing, as I mentioned before, is this customer centricity, making sure that you are looking at the impact of all the decisions that you're making, looking at your customers and understand as best you can, how are we impacting our customers? And this could be product decisions. This could be finance decisions. I mean, any number of things in the business that all should sort of point to the customer and say, does this impact how we deliver value? When you wrote this down, what did that mean to you? Like, what in particular stood out to you as an important part of this customer centricity thing?
Well, it's very easy to get into your mindset of how this impacts yourselves. Do we have the systems? Do we have the processes? This is going to be really boring coding work. This is not going to be very interesting. So you have all of that sort of framework, and it's very easy to just keep doing that. And I used to see it a lot around the traps, and I go, whoa, we need to step back and actually walk in the shoes of the customer and go, well, what does this actually mean for them? What does this mean in terms of them keeping using your product, what they say about your product? And let's face it, if you actually disappoint them enough times, they will actually leave you. And if they leave you, you lose your revenue, which is very simplistic on one level, but it's actually not. And so always actually just asking the question when you're making your decisions, even if you think they're internally focused decisions, say, how does this impact our customers? We just bang on it about all the time, is just always think in terms of the customer. So boring, isn't it, Peter? But it is, everything is about the customer when you're in business.
So if there's a through line through a lot of our work, Kate, I think it is the boring bits, right? I mean, to me, that's what it boils down to. It's first principles stuff, and it's boring. Well, it can be accused of being boring, I think. But what I'm most interested in this particular topic, it's getting teammates to think about the customer. What is the impact on them? I think at every level of the company is really important to try to understand that, because at the end of the day, as you said, if you lose one, that's revenue gone. And
it's more the pattern, really, isn't it? More the pattern and the themes that start to come through.
What's a practical thing that leaders or teammates can do to start thinking a bit more with that customer-centric mindset?
Well, when we talked in the beginning about the leadership, having that framework and displaying that framework of why we're in business and how we operate, etc. It's about bringing that down to when you're making those smaller decisions. And so it's always, for me, I always just run through things in my head. I go, what does it mean for revenue? What does this mean in terms of the customer? Is this going to be good for them, bad for them? They won't give a damn about it, rats about it. I tend to think in terms of what does this mean in terms of our processes and our practices? Are we creating a rod for our back? And sometimes you change things for feels good, but it really doesn't do a thing. And then the fourth thing, how does this impact the team? So I tend to run through that in my mind, and I like to also then run through it when I'm working through decisions with people.
Talking about Atlassian, and one of the values that it's pretty publicly well known, and I'm going to have to do some editing on this one, but don't f the customer being a company-wide value, and it was always there, and that came up in so many meetings. So that was one way of sort of not forcing people to think about the customer, but it was always there. And I think it worked. I don't know about your experience with it, but it definitely came up in a lot of conversations that I had.
It does. Yeah. And it's trading off on those decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of decisions, the fourth and final thing that we were talking about today in terms of building that business acumen muscle is driving everything that we just talked about. So from setting the environment to upskilling your teammates to that customer centricity, including that in your decision making, how it helps you to make better decisions, faster decisions, and ultimately just move faster as a company. When we say use these things in your decision making, how do you use these things?
Well, let's think this through. It's that how many times we've been in meetings where everybody wants to do everything. So when we're talking about budgets and everybody's got their wish list, and you've got to have some hard conversations of why and how you're doing things. And so to me, this is by having everyone's muscle being built in this regard, you're actually going to just have better discussion. And you try to keep people out of their camps of, oh, this is my thing, or I want this, and people pushing from that perspective as opposed to being a bit more higher and a bit more strategic. So to me, you can really watch to see how conversations change if you actually build people's understanding, and so that people actually ask better questions, because that's what it often comes down to, is people actually just misunderstand things and can get annoyed why things aren't being done, or they don't want to do that because it's boring coding, for example. And, sometimes it's very, very, very good reasons why we're all going to do some boring coding, everyday mundane stuff, because it's actually where the action is in terms of the customer and what they want and need.
What I'm hearing there is the better teammates and everyone understands why we need to make this decision, the better off you'll be. Does that make sense?
It does. You said so much better than me, Pete. Beautiful.
No, I don't know. I don't know about that, but I think that's really important. I think you have more enlightened conversations if you can kind of understand the business, understand why things need to happen a certain way, and you can go faster, right?
Yeah.
I think you made the point earlier that ultimately someone needs to be responsible for making that decision. So this shouldn't be a consensus. I mean, you can do consensus building, but at some point the buck stops where, and you've got to define that. Who is that? And make the decision, move on, measure.
And the train leaves the station and get on board.
Yes. I think that's a really important part of that too, right? Is actually being definitive in your decision making. We talked today about building up your business acumen muscle with 4 things that you can do in your business. The first one, as a leader, set the expectation and set the environment. Number 2, allow the individuals to put their hands up and upskill where needed. As a leader, make sure that they can do that. Number 3, extreme customer centricity. Make sure that you're always focused on and trying to be as empathetic as you can with the customer as possible. And number 4, drive all of this through your decision making for faster, better decision making, and make sure someone is there to make that decision.
That's it from us, everybody, and more sales and more power to you all. Take care. Until next time.
See ya.